I'm going to talk today about conversational architecture, which is an approach to describing contextual applications, circumstances. So just give a brief introduction on who I am. I'm actually not an information architect. I'm a tech guy. And I founded a company 5 years ago called Axelent. And we make a product called ACE, the Adaptive Context Engine. And basically, it is a technology for enabling contextual applications. And by that, I mean applications that respond according to the specific context in which they're presented, having knowledge of the users and responding dynamically and appropriately to that. But it's not an ad, so I'm not going to talk more about ACE. Oh, and additionally, before that, I ran technology at Huge. It's a digital agency here in New York, and before that at Alexander Interactive. So, out there, and just for proper attribution, I did not come up with this list. This is from a book called The Age of Context by Robert Scoble and Shea Israel. And they're talking about primarily technological and sociological forces that are existing today that are driving us towards this idea of the importance of context within applications, be they websites or mobile apps, or things that we don't know about yet, new form factors, new devices, new interactions. And, you know, here's a couple of ones that we know about right now. That's the Amazon Echo up there with the Alexa. So Alexa, please order me 500 rolls of toilet paper. It shows up at your door. And of course, Siri and the iPhone. And you know, I think what we're probably can expect is more and more of these are going to appear over the course of the year that respond appropriately to that. Age of computing, moving from a box that sits on top of your desk into something that is, you know, following you around in your back pocket, and onto, you know, things that you wear, maybe things that are embedded in devices you interact with. All of this, sort of hop around here. With those devices come sensors. Sensors of motion, of light, things that, you know, look at your eyes as you read, things that monitor your heart rate, see whether you're excited when you're, we know all these things. Social media, the greatest data honeypots ever created, where we voluntarily tell all about ourselves, who our friends are, what we're interested in, what we're doing on a regular basis, how all these things connect together. And finally, location, when computing moves off your desk and into this permeable environment, it lives in a particular place. And so me standing on the stage in this room implies a certain amount of context as to what I'm doing. Just by, you know, if you could pinpoint this down to like these 3 feet, you have a pretty good idea of what my context is right now. All of this stuff combines together and creates context, and going forward, we're going to need to be able to build for it. Unfortunately, we don't have a good way to talk about it. This is the Rosetta Stone. And right now, there's a situation where, you know, you can talk to a bunch of tech people about artificial intelligence and talk about a lot of concepts there. You can talk to business stakeholders about, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we could build these things that would react contextually to the users? And then there's this kind of void in the middle where we don't have a good way to talk about the design of these applications. And this creates a problem. First thing is, it's just hard to discuss the problem space, or a language to to be able to clearly articulate how these things should work. And of course, all these things. So what I'm going to say, we're actually missing what I call a bootstrapping metaphor. This is ripped off when he visited Xerox PARC, took it back, and built the Mac. And it's obviously super primitive by today's standards, but the metaphor is already there. There's the windows. It's a little pixelated on the screen, but there's the windows, the icons, the menus, pointers. It's the beginning of the desktop metaphor. And how do we build this thing in terms that stand on this platform of an application? There are several attributes of the network that actually work pretty well for our problem space. A stack of context that follows a conversation as it moves from one place to another. And finally, conversations are multi-channel. You can have a conversation that takes place on the phone, over email, face-to-face. A single conversation can bridge from one channel to another. You can move from one to another. It's the same conversation. You know, oh, this is getting hard to type. Let's go voice. Well, actually, this fits pretty well. This is what we multi-channel. So, given this, let's and so I'm going to say visual expression, language, or cave language. And the idea is this is a visual design language for communicating about contextual applications. And basically, there were 3 areas of concern. I once had these as layers, but I realized things are not that clear. So for the language itself, number of goals. The first one is whiteboard/napkin/ fancy presentation friendly. So when we're describing this, just go and write in my terrible handwriting, you know, an idea about how it ought to behave on the whiteboard. Or it could be part of this lovely deliverable that would go out to the client. Secondly, methodology neutral. I think at this point in time, we actually don't know the best way to build these things. I think it's okay to admit that. And so this is a language. It is not the way you design these things. I think best practice is just starting with a way to talk about it. Create very simple ideas with this language, but also you could create very extensive, very ideas. And finally, useful across disciplines. I think what is critical as we enter this world is that whether you're a developer or a user experience person, information architect, a business stakeholder, that we're all able to talk together about how these things ought to work. And so the idea of the cave language is it would be something with which you can create artifacts to pass around to people from different backgrounds, and everyone can be on the same page as far as what we were talking about. So here's a look. So let's have a deeper dive. The first area of concern we wanted to look at was data. What does the application know? So we have our data symbol up here at the top. Now, data does not spring into existence out of nowhere. It has an origin. It is of concern to us where this data is coming from. So the rest of this has to do with the origins of data. So we have device sensors. Sometimes there are multiple sensors per device. Sometimes a device and a sensor is the same thing. There's the idea of an external data source, and this just means some other system is providing the data. And then there's a very special kind of data, which is user input, where a user is explicitly telling us something. And so we might make a construct like this. From Facebook, we are getting your likes. Now we know what you like. So once we have this, so now we've got that data, what does it mean? And this is a structure, somewhat ironically, called pages analysis. And it is based on dividing context up into these elements that comprise the overall context of the interaction. So we have persona, and I know a lot of different meanings are attached to that word, but for our purpose, personas have to do with something we know about the personality of the user we're dealing with. They are compulsive impulse buyers. You know, they like to buy things on the drop of a hat. Affinity. What do they like? What are they interested in? Goals. What are they trying to accomplish at this moment? The environment is a big idea, which is like, where is this interaction taking iPhone, whatever? It could be that it's raining right now. And sentiment, what is the emotional timbre of the interaction? You imagine someone working their way through times where we're making inferences based on data and extracting context that this person is. Or we know something else about them. What can we do about that? Now it is dynamically and appropriately to the context that surrounds the user. And so, like the context into elements, we're going to break down the idea of modal response. A way of speaking, it could be just any sort of policy is a little more of an abstraction, saying, well, we're not going to talk about specific content user. Heating system. This is a set that when the temperature drops below a little bit, they really feel it. That's my email, and I welcome input. Thank you.